These are all of the supplies and ingredients that we'll use to make the cheesecake. The first thing I'm gonna do before we even start making anything is line my cheesecake pan with parchment paper. Now that I've lined my pan with parchment paper, I'm going to line like the whole entire bottom of the pan with aluminum foil, because I'm gonna put some water in my baking pan when I bake my cheesecake to make sure it comes out really creamy. Lining the bottom of the pan is really crucial because when we put water in the baking pan, we're not gonna want it to seep in or it can make our crust soggy. Now that I've lined my pan with aluminum foil, we can crumble the graham cracker. Now that I've melted my butter, it's time to add the sugar to my crust, which is the crumbled up graham cracker. I've already added 2 tablespoons. So I'm gonna add 1 more. That makes it 3. And now for the melted butter. I always like to mix it by hand, just so I can get a feel and make sure that all of my crumbles have been coated with the butter and the sugar, and make sure that's at the consistency that I need for when I spread it out. Now that I have my crust all made, I'm gonna pour it into my pan like so. There's a little bit left. And just spread it out. Now that the crust is finished, we can start with the filling. This is probably the most important part, which is the cream cheese. It's very important to make sure that the cream cheese is whipped before adding any other ingredients. Now that we've got it mixed some, we can add in the sugar, and that will get blended in as well. The next step is adding the eggs. I'm only going to add 1 because I've already added the other 2. So I'll just dump that right in there. And we'll get to mixing. After you've mixed it pretty well, you can then go and add the vanilla. That's the last ½ teaspoon that we'll be adding. I use 6, or you can always use 3. So now that my vanilla has been added, I'm just going to mix it in really well with the rest of my batter. And I'm going to do this until the vanilla is pretty much all dissolved in my batter. And after that, I'll just make sure that I'm cleaning the sides as well, just to make sure I'm not wasting any good ingredients. So everything has been mixed well. The only thing that's left is to add the whipping cream. Make sure that it's regular, because if you use heavy whipping cream, then it's gonna make the cheesecake batter too fluffy and it'll taste like air. So let's add that in. That's 1 cup. And we'll mix it too. You'll notice that the batter has bubbles in it now that the whipping cream has been added. It's very important in this stage to make sure that the batter is completely smooth, or it'll cause the cheesecake to crack and break. Now that the batter is smooth, we can pour it into actual cheesecake crust. And then we'll pop it in the oven. So I've got my oven ready, but before I stick my cheesecake in, I'm gonna boil some water. And I'll explain why in a second. So now that the water is done boiling, I'm gonna take the cheesecake and put it into this little large baking pan. And I'm gonna get the water from my pan and a mug, just because it's easier to pour. and pour it into the baking pan. I'm going to do this till it's about halfway full on my cheesecake pan. And this is just going to help to take away some of the heat when it's baking and keep the cheesecake creamy. So it looks like that's enough. Now I'm going to shut the oven and let my cheesecake bake for an hour. So my cheesecake finished baking and I just let it sit in the oven for about 30 minutes so it could cool down. Here's my result. Now it's time for the cheesecake to go in the fridge. So you're supposed to let it sit overnight. So this is actually me taking it out the morning after. And now that my cheesecake has cooled down, I can now put my toppings on top of it. For this cheesecake, I decided to do a white chocolate, strawberry glaze, caramel, drizzled vanilla New York style cheesecake. So I'm just going to put my strawberry glaze on now. I used about half of the container just to make sure that it's completely covered and just smooth it out so that the whole top of my cheesecake is covered in strawberry glaze. Now that my cheesecake is completely covered in strawberry glaze, I can now melt my white chocolate, which I'll be drizzling over it as soon as it's done melting in the microwave. So after about 30 seconds in the microwave, the chocolate should be ready to stir, and you'll probably have to stir for about a minute or so before you get the consistency where you can drizzle it. But after it's all melted and there's no lumps, you're good to go. Now, to me, this is the funnest part because you can be as creative as you like. So I don't really have a pattern or anything specific I'm going for. I'm just trying to make it look pretty. So I'll just be drizzling the chocolate wherever I want to, honestly. So now that the white chocolate has been drizzled, I can now start to work on getting the perimeter of my cheesecake filled with whipped cream. This is optional, but I just like adding whipped cream around the perimeter of my cheesecake just to make it look a little bit more elegant and pretty to me. This was a little spur of the moment, but I had some caramel, so I decided, hey, why not drizzle it? You wouldn't have to do this on the regular. If you wanted to, you're more than welcome, but that's pretty much it. After this, just pop it in the fridge and it'll be ready to eat.